Hi, I'm Trevor Blumenau from Voodoo Robotics, and I'm really excited to show you a new spreadsheet that we've been working on. Runs under Google's Sheets, and I apologize in advance for this video. It's going to be a long video. I'm going to go into a lot of nitty-gritty details, but I'm going to try and save all the yucky details for the end. So, you know, feel free to just watch the first part of this video. Tune in for as long as you're interested, and, you know, if you really want to know how the whole thing works, I will go into all the details in this video. But with no further ado, let me jump right in and show you the spreadsheet here. The first thing to notice is that there's several tabs along the bottom over here. And so this is just the introductory page with the video that you're watching now. And let's skip over to some very interesting stuff at the control page. The control page, you can see here, I've got let's see, these square boxes made up of 4 cells, and I've replicated that in a whole bunch of locations here. So I've got 3 at the top, followed by 3 down here, 2 below that, and then another 2 down here, and then a control device. And these devices are set up to look just like the cart, which you see here, and that cart is actually right behind me over here. So you can actually see how we've associated different parts of the spreadsheet to different parts of the cart. So, you know, we got the 3 buckets up here. That's these 3 parts of the spreadsheet over here, followed by these 3 buckets over here. That's these 3 parts of the spreadsheet. So just to make my point clear, let's go to B3, which will correspond to this device right here over my left shoulder. And I'm going to send that device a message. Let's say here is, and then I'm going to hit Control-Enter and say a new message. And then I'm going to hit a regular enter. And then you can see that the spreadsheet is actually working on that. And it takes that information and sends it right into the tag. Here is a new message. And the tune that it's playing actually is controlled on the default screen over here. It's playing Yankee Doodle, and it's got a device timeout of 20 seconds. So we can actually change that. Let's just change to a regular beep. I guess let's leave a 20-second timeout is fine. We can go back here, and this time let's send it a flash message. So we'll say to B3 again. Here is a flash, and then Control-Enter, message, and then a regular enter. Again, you can see that the spreadsheet is working over here. It removes the data and then sends it to the tag. And you can see that it just had a single flash, a single beep, and it's followed by 20 seconds of flashing with this message here. Here is a flash message. So, and of course, you know, this is B2 over here. We can do B2 if you want. Oh, let's on B2, let's change the static message. Say, let's say, keep this, and then I'm going to hit Control-Enter, information. And then I'm going to hit Enter. And you can see again, it does the saving over here. And this time it actually keeps that entry. It's not clearing that cell, because that information is actually stored in B2. And if I go to B2, it says keep this information. OK, so we've established that on this control page, you can interact with any of the devices on the cart. Very, very cool. And of course, this is a regular cart. It cost us, I don't know, $200. And the devices are $5 a month. Very, very economical. OK, so how are we going to use this cart? That's where we get into it. Oh, so let's just go to the defaults page. Again, I just want you to see here that you've got a place for a picker. You can put a picker's name here. You can change all the tunes, you know, these different tunes that we provided, but I'll show you in the nitty-gritty as we go through this again, how you can actually create your own tunes if you wanted to. OK, let's get to the really cool stuff. Here's a pick list example. So on this spreadsheet, we actually have some pick lists. And so you can see here's a pick list ID. And here are 6 SKUs in that pick list, and a quantity for each line in that pick list, and the location on the cart, in this case, for those items. And then we have a barcode. Now notice that this barcode is simply just a replication of the pick list ID. And I've actually printed out that barcode right here. You can see I've got, this is just a printout of the spreadsheet. And the reason why I've done that is because I've actually got a barcode reader over here. And you can actually go up and scan that barcode. And you can see that it actually processes the barcode and sends out messages to all the tags. And they will all light up with those messages, including, let's see, that one was B3, requesting one of 333-555, which is this line right here. And so all those tags lit up. We had a total of 6 lines light up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent. And so that's a simple demonstration of how we can create a simple pick ticket. And of course, you know, you could have these devices on a pick wall, for example, or anything like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a cart. We've just attached these here with double-sided tape. Could screw them down to different locations in your warehouse. Very easy to interact with using a very economical barcode reader. And we'll talk about how to get your data into these pick lists in a little bit. But before we do that, let's go and see something more exciting. So here is a will call example. This is just a one-to-one case where you've got a will call ID with a barcode associated with it. And let's say the customer's name is Smith. And let's say that that order is stored in location C1. And let's see if we've got one that's in B3, because that's the one you can see. OK, so here's Marks. We've got Harpo and Marks. And OK, so let's see. I'm not sure if I printed out that one over here. Yeah, I do have that one. I printed out that spreadsheet. And you can see down at the bottom is B3. Actually, in this case, actually, we've got 2 orders in B3, because this one says Fincher. Let's go up and find Fincher. There's the Fincher line right there on line 17. OK, so now, assuming my cursor is in the right spot at the top, yeah, I can hit this with a barcode reader. There we go. And it put in the correct number, ending in 249. And it's processing that number. And it should light up B3 again for us. There you go. And it says Trev, order for Fincher, right there. And it's order number 4324249. OK, excellent. Now, a little bit more complicated example over here. And this one's a little bit more difficult to explain. This is more of a real-world example. Let's look at this, what we call the lockstep example. It's sometimes what happens in a warehouse is that you want pickers to do things in a certain sequence and not to deviate from that specific sequence. This is an example of that. So what we've done here is we've simulated a picker moving around a warehouse using a cart, like you see behind me, and he is guided by a control device. This is a control device over here that you can either attach to the cart on the side, something like that. And this device is designed to tell the picker where to go and what item to get off the shelf. And then what the picker does is he uses his scanner to scan each location when he gets to that location. So let me just act it out. You can see how it works. Let's go, and we'll just hit the Start button. OK, so we'll hit the Start button in the spreadsheet. You'll see exactly what happens. Now, this is the control device. So the first thing it does is it tells us to go to row 1, column 2, and pick 22 of SKU number 1222. And that's the first line over here in our pick list, right? And I've conveniently printed out that page over here. And the idea is that this barcode label R1C2, this barcode is actually at that location where the picker is going to go. And so he takes his handy-dandy scanner, and he scans that location, OK? Let me make sure that I got that location. There we go. Well, I don't think I got that location. Let's do that again. Okay, so he scans that location. You can see it got filled in, row 1, column 2. Now, it says good location. That means it recognized that location. And now look what happened. So now the device at on A2 on the cart is telling us to put 22 of SKU number 12222 into that location, and at the same time, our control device has now updated us and says, go to row 2, column 1, and pick 6 of SKU number 11955, okay? And so now we go skedaddle off to that location, following our directions, and when we get there, we enter in row 2, column 1. And we get a good location signal on the spreadsheet. That means we're going in order. We've hit this location. And so it now updates the tag. This is B3 over here. As you can see, it says Trev put 6 of SKU 119-55. And it's also updating here and saying, go to R4C2 for the next line. And so in this way, we're executing a lockstep pick. That's what we call it here, that the picker cannot deviate. Let's say he scans the wrong location. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're going to jump ahead and do R4C4 at the bottom of my printed out page here. R4C4, and you can see immediately, it says unexpected location, and what's going to happen? We get a really nasty tone here. It says error, go to R4C3. Pick 1 of 333-555. So that's how our lockstep demo works. Okay, that's the basics of the spreadsheet. Now let's go through and talk about how you might take this spreadsheet and modify it for your own purposes. So, we have a starter kit. It's very economical. We send out 10 devices for around $500 with the turbo. And, you could very easily take those 10 devices and attach them to your own picking cart. So let's talk about what that would look like. First of all, to install the spreadsheet, you've got to go through and you've got to make a copy of the spreadsheet. So don't use our spreadsheet. Our spreadsheet, actually, you can't actually write anything into our spreadsheet. You only should have read-only permission. So really, the first thing you've got to do is make your own copy of the spreadsheet. And I've outlined the whole process here on the install page. You've got to make your own copy of the spreadsheet. Then you need to add a project trigger. We'll talk about how to do that. And then you need to give the script authorization. Google, in their wisdom, has actually made it quite difficult for you to, do things that are nasty to your Google Docs. And so there are quite a few hoops you have to jump through in order to get this thing working. And we'll go through that right now. Okay, so first of all, if you're looking at our spreadsheet while you're going through this demo, what you're going to want to do is go to the File menu and click on Make a Copy. So that's the easiest way. You follow those directions to create your own copy, and then you'll come back to this page again in your new copy. If you like, there's also a link in here which you can click on in a browser. That'll also generate a copy. If you want to email this link to somebody, that's an easy way for them to automatically create their copy. So that's how you copy the spreadsheet. Then we got to create this thing called a project trigger. Okay. So how do we do a project trigger? First thing we got to do is we got to go under the Tools menu and go to Script Editor. When you go to Script Editor, you'll see this window over here. It'll open this thing called Trevor's Scripts, and this is where the code is stored that's running in the background of the spreadsheet. So what we're doing here is we're actually telling the Google Sheet that when we make a change to the Google Sheet, that we want to run this code. And the way we do that is we go under Edit, and we go to Current Project Triggers. And you can see here I've already set mine so that it will run on my edit from the spreadsheet on an edit event. And I've outlined all of this over here. If you look in the spreadsheet, you can actually see, I'm just going to close this now, go back to the spreadsheet. You can see here, there's the dialog box. Now, when you do that, invariably you're going to get this crazy error. This is a bug at Google. And for some reason, you have to go into the script, and you just have to modify this code slightly. So I'm just going to hit a space bar right there. And then you can even do backspace if you want to get rid of the change. But notice all of a sudden you've got this red little asterisk here, which means the code has been modified. And so then you have to hit the Save button, and that saves a new copy. OK, so that's the way you get past this little error dialog. Now, if you go back and you click on that Edit Current Projects Triggers and set the trigger, you shouldn't get this little red message over here. Now, but what you will get is you'll get an authorization request. It'll say it needs your permission to run. And so first thing you got to do is say review permissions. And then it says this app isn't verified. And so don't click back to safety. Well, I guess you can if you don't want to run the script. But what you got to do is you got to click on the advanced hyperlink here. And then that takes you to this little dialog that says Google hasn't reviewed the app. Are you sure you want to do this? And you say, yes, go to Trevor's scripts, and it is unsafe. But you got to trust me, I guess. And then it then says, type the word continue. You got to type that word with a capital C, and then you push the next button. And then the last step is it says to you, OK, this is what the script wants to do. Will you allow it? And you click on allow. That's how you get your version of the script up and running for you. OK. Now you've got your Google Sheet, and you have to go into the locations page and define your devices and your locations. So now a very easy way to do this is actually from SkuKeeper. If you've got all your devices already registered in SkuKeeper, you can go to the All Devices page, and you can actually export this as a CSV. I'm not going to go in and show you how to do that. You'd put it into Excel, and you can copy the columns out of Excel and use these locations or your overridden locations. We can go into that in another video. But essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a relationship between your devices and your location names, and those location names have to be meaningful to you. So, if you've got a cart, let's say, with 5 rows on the top, you can say top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4, top 5. And then you put a device in each of those locations. So really what you've got to do is you've got to make this table meaningful for your installation. OK. Now, once you've done that, you can go to this control panel over here. When you're editing this page, this control page, cut and paste is your friend. So the way to do it is to just left-click on the beginning of one of these cells, shift-click on the bottom, and then hit Copy to select that chunk, and then just paste it, where you want it. Now, of course, when you paste these cells where you want them, these groups of cells, you probably will see a little marker in the corner of the location. And that's because in your device locations, like for example, I'll make a little change here. Let's say I go and I change location A1 and call it new A1. OK? So we're going to put new A1 in location in the first spot. Now when I go to the control, you can see there's this little red thing in the corner which tells me invalid input must fall within specified range. So it's actually checking to make sure that you're using something from that part of the spreadsheet. So let's change it back now. We'll change it back to A1. OK? And now we'll get that red mark again. You can see it in the corner there. Let's change back to A1. So that's essentially how you go through, and you can change this spreadsheet to look like your cart or your device or your forklift or your will call wall or your put wall or whatever you're using. You can set it up to look exactly like this. Again, the reason why we made ours look this way is because our cart looks like this. That was our choice. And you know, of course, we've got this the extra control device, which we put on the side over here. So let me go and we'll just delete these extra ones for now. I'm just going to delete those rows. Okay, so we're back to the way that we were looking before. Okay, so now let's look a little bit more carefully at the defaults. Now the defaults over here, you can see there's a list of these names we just chose arbitrarily, and these are actually tunes. Now if you're musically inclined, you can actually recognize some of this. So this is the tempo right here is 140, and then you've got a G in the 5th octave sharp, held for 2 beats, and then an A in the 5th octave held for 2 beats. And so each of these lines is basically the tempo followed by a series of notes. And so you know, you can put in whatever you want here. You can see that, you know, this, if you just compare the two, the regular beep is a C in the 5th octave held for 4 beats, and a real constant long is C in the 5th octave held for 400 beats. So you can see what's basically going on there. Now, the picker's name, you can put in whatever picker's name you want here, and you'll see that that is used in the subsequent spreadsheets when addressing the picker using the tags. And this is where you select which tune on the left you're going to use for those pick operations. And so right now we've got it set to regular beep. We can go in and set it to waterfall, for example. And then here, this is the timeout. This is how long the device is going to be illuminated before the light automatically turns off. And you can change that, I guess, if you're running on a forklift. You might want to set that to, you know, a few minutes. Whereas for a picker to find a device, he sees it turn on, maybe 20 seconds is sufficient. Of course, if you put in a very long timeout here, you're burning batteries. Really, these devices use very, very, very little battery power unless the light is actually on. Now, if you put 0 in for a timeout, be very careful, because that essentially means the device is not going to turn off until you actually push the button on the device to acknowledge. So that's the defaults page. You know, I guess if you're musically inclined, you might make some changes here. I sort of doubt it. You know, if you've got a picker that has a very, you know, specific music interest, maybe he'll put in some lines, bars from his favorite song. Okay, let's talk about the pick list example in a little bit more detail over here. So you can see over here that basically, if you just look at this part of the sheet, right, you can see that this is a very stereotypical pick list right here in this left part. And this barcode is nothing to be intimidated by. This is just an image. And you can see here the code for that image. All that I've done is I've declared it as equal to, and then I use this image word right here. And you can see the format that Google requires. So it's looking for a URL, and then this mode information, and then a height and a width. And so you can see that the URL that I'm constructing here is actually from a website called barcodesinc.com. And they are very nice to provide a generator that's based on a code that you submit to them. It'll automatically generate an image that contains that code. And you give it some parameters like the style, the type, and the height, and the resolution, and the font. And then these parameters down here, the 4, 100, 300, are again the Google parameters here, which represent the mode, the height, and the width. Okay, so really, this barcode is live. You can actually, if you go in here, hang on a second. Let me undo those changes. We don't want those changes happening. Okay, let's go back here. Just hit Enter. Barcode's back. Now, if I go and I change this barcode ID, you can actually see it's live. So if I change it to, let's say, 422222, hit Enter, you can see that it automatically refreshes that barcode. And that's true in all of these spreadsheets. That's the way we've constructed barcodes in all of these spreadsheets, just with the image syntax. So there it is for you right there. Okay, so that is the basics. And of course, you know, to put your pick lists onto a page like this is actually quite easy. Certainly you can cut and paste to, put your pick lists in here. But Google offers some very, very interesting commands. For example, you can go in and if you just do it, let's see, a web search for Google Sheets get table. I think it's, let's see, there's a simple way to scrape an HTML page. This is what I was looking for. So here you can see that you can actually section out table information from another HTML website and put that into your code. Oh, the command is import HTML. And all it takes is a URL and a couple of parameters, and bang, all of a sudden you've got the data in your Google Sheet. What could be easier than that? Amazing. So that's the way we anticipate that you would use something like this. And of course, your pick list may look different. Maybe you've got images in your pick list that helps the picker find, the specific thing that he's looking for. And, again, we're using these very economical barcode readers. You could actually use your own barcode reader as well. You could even be running this sheet on a barcode reading device. So that's another option to you as well. Okay, I'll talk about the software in a second, but essentially what our software is doing is when it sees you enter something right here, it's going through each of these locations using this location name on the device locations page to find the device ID, right? And then it's sending each of those device IDs these different commands. Very, very simple code, and I'll go through that in a second. The will call is even simpler because here, really, it's only doing one call to a device. So here, you're going to scan in a barcode, and again, these are live barcodes. I can change this to, let's see, 455555, and there you can see it gets updated. As long as your cursor is in this cell right here where it says scan the barcode, when you use your barcode scanner and read this barcode, it's going to put this number right in this location. And the software is set up so that when it sees that location, it's going to come down this column and it's going to find this information right here. And it's going to pair that with the defaults, with my name and my tune and my device timeout, and execute an API call to our tag. And I guess I should be talking about that as well. On our website, on the integration page, there's a whole description of the API that we're using. Finally, let me just do the lockstep quickly. Here it's a little bit more complicated, as I said earlier. You've got a start button. What the start button does when I click on the start button is it resets this current row right here to row 15. It's prompted me for my username and password. Let me just put that in. And okay, so it goes back to row 15, and it basically sets up the start of your lockstep. So there's a difference between starting and each iterative step, okay? The starting is initiated with the start button. And what that's doing is it's resetting and then it's sending a single event to the control device. But when you actually scan a location, you use one of these barcodes again, it's putting that information in here and it's verifying that that location is the correct location on this row right here, the current row. So that's the basics of how the spreadsheet works. Now, let's take a dive really deep into the code behind this whole thing. Let's look at the scripts now. I've tried to document these, pretty well. You can look through the code. Certainly, in order to read this kind of code, you should have a background in programming languages. It's not that complicated. It's a lot like JavaScript. Really, it's what they call AppScript. Google calls it AppScript. Looks a lot like JavaScript, but there are sort of these object types like a spreadsheet and things like that that you can get information about. There's a lot of information here in the API reference. I encourage you to go there and look at it. But essentially what's going on here is we're making calls to the devices using our URL when certain events happen on the spreadsheet. So let's just go and review that URL again. So I'm going to go to voodoorobotics.com/integration, I believe it is. And, oh, no, it is, let's see here, it is pick-to-light integration. Okay, here we go. This is the URL. So this is really what we're trying to get to. When you scan one of those barcodes, we've got to generate the right URL for each scan. And so the way that we do that, you can see over here, the first thing when we log in, well, okay, so you can't just call that URL directly. You have to be logged in with your username and password. In order to be logged in with your username and password, what does that mean? That really means that I've issued a cookie to you. And so you've got to store that cookie by filling in your username and password. So what you do is you create a request over the web for the login page using your username and password, and in response to that, if it's correct, I send you a cookie. Then you use that cookie repeatedly for all your subsequent calls to the URL. It's a very, that's how a lot of web servers work in terms of an authorized interaction. No different here. I will say that we're storing the cookie inside AppScript. And that storage is maintained, I believe, for 10 minutes. And each time I make another call, I restore that cookie every 10 minutes. And so that way, you'll only be logged out after 10 minutes of idle time, right? Okay, so you can see the do login over here. Notice also that there's some HTML here as well, a login HTML page with some actual JavaScript that runs when a person actually clicks on the login. And so you can actually see what happens when you execute the login procedure. I'm not going to go through every single line of code, but you can see here that I'm basically getting the cookie out of the response header and storing it in this cache. And then there is a little bit of a complication here in that if you think about it, when a person enters text into a cell, at that point, you might need to log in to the machine, into the server, or you might not need to log in. You don't really know. And so what happens is I store that event of that entry of information, which actually comes in here in on my edit in this parameter E. I store that for later processing, just in case I need it, because if I try to process that request and I realize I don't already have the cookie, I have to go and get the cookie first and then reprocess. So that's the one complexity here. So, but you can see the basis of processing. As soon as I get this this event, I'm passing that event to the process change function, which is right below it here, with the sheet name, the row, the column, and the text that was actually typed into that location. And you can see here, I just break it down. I say, okay, if the text was typed on the pick list example, do this. If it was on the will call example page, do this. If it's on the lockstep example page, do this. And if it's on the control page, then you do this control function. And you can read through each of these things. This fixed lines utility, it's just there to use a carriage return to separate, and it's changing that carriage return into a slash in your URL. Get cookie is just designed to get the cookie if it's available, and if it's not, then it will start that login cycle and show you the login dialog. And store, by the way, that events for later use. Okay, device name, basically, we're not using this function right now. You can have a look at it. If you need it, you can use it. This is an interesting function, is location, and then we give it a location name. What happens here, if you look at the spreadsheet, when you go into the control panel, and let's say you type in something in this cell right here, what the code actually does is it looks above this cell to see if it's a valid location name. And if it's a valid location name, well, then it knows that this is a static call. But in this case, it's not a valid location name. It's got to look another cell above it and another cell above it. So really, it's how far below this location name you are that determines the type of call that you're going to make here. And so if you look at the script again, you can see here, I do I get the values that are in position location 1, location 2, and location 3. And those are the ones directly above, 2 above, and 3 above. And then I say, OK, is the one directly above me a location? If it isn't, I'm going to drop through and try the next one above me. And if that's not a location, then I'm going to drop through and try the one above that. And that's how I determine whether the type is a static call, a pick call, or a flash call. And then I use that type down here, you can see, in order to determine what kind of URL I'm going to use. So if it's a flash, I'm going to use this kind of URL. And again, this URL corresponds directly with our format that you see on the website. Very, very simple. And so, and then it's looking at the response. If it gets a bad code, it'll give you a transaction failed alert and that kind of thing. And then, of course, if it's a pick transaction or a flash transaction, it's going to clear that entry from the spreadsheet so that you can put in the next one. This function, location to device ID, very simple again. All that's doing is it's using this table right here for device locations, and it's doing a lookup. So it's saying, OK, what's the location? Give me the device ID for that location. So it's just looking through this list over here. Now, I want to make sure also that you're aware, if you look over here, there's also what I did was I clicked under Data, Named Ranges, and you can see all of the named ranges that I've defined in the spreadsheet. Those are very important because if you look at the code, for example, here's a get range by name, location names. If you're looking for that, you can go into this thing over here, into your named ranges window, and you can see location names is device location B2B, which is this column essentially. You can see that. And so all of the names that I use in the code are actually defined named ranges over here. That makes it very easy for you to, instead of hard coding specific locations, B1, A1, never really clear what's there, you can actually give it a name, and then if that item moves in the spreadsheet, you can actually update the spreadsheet without updating the code. Again, here, this is tune to tune code, simply just going through and doing the same exact thing on the defaults page where it's translating from the name of a tune to the tune code to find the tune code. OK, so then we can go down here. Here's a do pick list. You can see if you get a pick list put in, you can see that it's looking for that pick list start location and getting the value out of there, and then looking for the column, pick list ID column, and iterating through each value until it finds a blank. Okay. So, well, actually, this is going down to find the first pick list ID that matches what it found in the active pick list start. And then once it finds that, it goes through all of the rows until it finds no SKU. So let's look at what that does. It's basically going through here, and it's going to scan down here until it finds a pick list ID that matches what's in this cell. And then based on that, it's going to do a call to the tag for everything in this column until it reaches a blank. So this blank really is what tells the pick list that it's over. If you look in the code, it's looking for that empty SKU right there. So while the SKU is not empty, it's going to keep doing another location and another location and another location. Okay. In the will call example, very, very similar to the pick list example. Whatever you put in this cell, the program is going to scan down column A and look for that matching number, and then use the customer name column and the location column to generate a call to that tag. So let's just see how that goes. So here's the code. It says this is the ID that it's looking for, caller ID, right here. It's checking from row 1 all the way through the length, going through until it finds a match, and then it breaks. And then it uses this row number variable right here to say, OK, let's look up that value. It's going to use the row right here to find out who the customer is, what the location is. And then, of course, it's generating ultimately this URL right here. And that URL is used with the URL fetch option right here. And of course, in the options, I should mention this again, the cookie is stored in that options parameter right here. OK, so let's do the Lockstep example. Lockstep actually has 2 functions. Here's the first function. This is the start Lockstep. And then this is a do Lockstep. So start Lockstep actually runs when you hit the start button. Okay, so let's go to the Lockstep example. When you hit the start button, we're going to run this code up here. And when you enter in a location number in the cell, we're going to run the code below down here. Okay? So also, again, it's very, very simple. The only complexity here is that in the start Lockstep, I only make one call to the control device. Okay, so I'm looking for that control device, and once I find the control device, I make a call just to the control device with the parameters that are given. Whereas when I do a Lockstep function, I'm actually doing 2 commands, one to the control device, but also one to the device at that location. So let's just look at that again on the demo. So the control location is governed by this parameter right here. So you can actually specify any tag as the control location. You can use any name. And again, this word control device came from device locations. That's this control device down here. And that was the device that we used for the Lockstep example. So when we click on the start button, it's going to reset the current row. Oh, let's look at that code. You can see over here, it's looking for that first location and then setting that value. Let's see, not here, up here. So it's adjusting the row by adding 1 and then setting the value there. And so that tells it where to start. In other words, the next time when I scan something, it's going to be looking at this row location over here, this Lockstep row. OK, so that's basically how the code works. I'd encourage you to go through it in more detail. This is a very high-level view. Again, you do need to know a little bit about JavaScript. JavaScript is very similar to C, C++. They're all very, very similar languages. This actually is AppScript, and there's a lot of help online. Again, you can look into the help menu. There's API reference documentation. There's getting started documentation, tutorials. Lots of very, very useful information out there. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that it took so long, and hopefully you got a lot out of it. Thanks for your time.